live doing the plan.
Coming to you live is the Auto Hub Show, changing automotive one show at a time with Ian and Jeff. And here we go.
Good morning. So with the disclaimer, Jeff, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody, and the views and opinions expressed on the Auto Hub Show are those of our guests and not necessarily Ian and Jeff or the Auto Hub Show, and although they might be.
So go ahead, Jeff.
Well, here we are again from the podcast stage at Used Car Week 2022, where we moved into another section, and now they're focusing on some other really cool stuff. But speaking of cool, we have two very, very cool. Whoa, I'm back. Two very cool guests with us. First of all, we have somebody new to the show, Becky Anderson from get the company. It's
Cars Recon.
Cars Recon, and you know something. Recon is a big deal right now. We were talking earlier today about some people saying, I don't have a Recon, my car, they sell right away. Becky, would you mind introducing yourself, telling us a bit about you, and we'll go from there.
All right, good morning. Thanks for having me on today, guys. My name is Becky Anderson. I'm the president of Cars Recon, and we, just to put it, short and sweet, we're a recon company that we're a sublet vendor at auctions and dealerships. So we provide all the labor management and materials for primarily detail and body shop, paint and body shops. We've done mechanical work and a number of other things too, surrounding reconning the car. So we are primarily at auctions. Like I said, we're in some dealerships and just kind of all things recon. We've been around for 20 years. So my father started the company 20 years ago. He worked in the auction industry for a very long time and saw the need for the recon work to be separate from the auction. So have a vendor come in and do it.
Well, thanks for taking the time. We do appreciate it. Next to her is our new favorite superstar in the automotive industry, coming to you live from San Diego, Danny Zaslewski of Country Hills Motors, right?
Yeah, Country Hill Motors. Ooh, hot.
And of course, introduce yourself, tell us a bit about yourself, and go from there.
Yeah, so born and raised Kansas City, Ukrainian by birth, and got to be a part of the journey that is growing up in a car dealership. I mean, literally worked in every piece of it since I was a little kid. And hey, good morning. And so part of that, I really, as a kid, I loved marketing when I was like 14, 15 years old. But I didn't understand why I liked marketing so much and why I liked it in the car business so much. And what I realized later is marketing is where technology existed in the car business, because I got to work with all the technology companies as a marketing person in order to figure out how to scale our business, how to buy the right cars, how to sell the right cars. And that kind of where industry meets technology is where my happy place is. And so, and I get to live my dream today with continuing to show up every day at my car dealership in the morning and innovating and working alongside really smart people. And then I get to drive downtown and build VinQ with an incredible team of people that, in my mind, really solve the same problem. So I get to be on both sides of it, but to me, it's being right in the middle of it, which I love.
And we had and thanks for that, Danny. I mean, we had the opportunity to check out the VR setup with the Oculus.
Oh, you got into the VR?
Oh yeah, we checked it out. It was a little bit disorienting afterwards, and we were a little worried about knocking stuff over. Your team was kind with us at the driving sales conference in Vegas.
That's awesome.
Last month, right?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't as kind to him as your team was. I took a video of him and I posted it online.
Oh, perfect.
It was pretty funny.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it was pretty good. So I got to ask you a question here. So big show. Danny, you're busy, you're crazy. Becky, we see you running around talking to people. What, other than more business, because let's not kid each other, it's all about business. What's your number one hope to take out of the show, Becky?
I mean, really, for all these shows and the conferences is just going to be the relationships that you formed prior to and continue to foster those relationships and build new ones at the shows because, in the car business, especially, relationships are where everything happens. So it might not be, new business today or tomorrow, but just building those relationships and getting to meet really cool people who do cool stuff like VinQ and that, learning more about all the different technology that's out there because I feel like every show we come to, and this one especially, you just see all kinds of new things or maybe even a company that's been around a while that has something new that they've innovated and, something different they're doing to help meet the needs because this industry, as we all know, is changing by the minute. So
Well, I have to tell you, speaking of meeting people, I got to meet a real Texas Ranger yesterday, and it was so much fun. And I remember him saying, because I said, "Do you know Walker?" Of course. And he laughs and he says, "They always ask him, do you know karate?" He says, "No, we got guns." So, Danny, same question. What's your number one take out of this, other than more business?
So I genuinely came here to continue to execute at a higher level because right now the solution or the idea, whether it be execution, whether it be reconditioning, whether it be merchandising, as a global topic, I think is powerful. But how are you executing relative to the constraints and opportunities you have within your car dealership? And for me, I want to make sure because we get to work with dealerships that sell 20 and 30 cars a month. We work with car dealerships that sell 100 to 200 cars a month, and we work with car dealerships that sell over 1,000 cars a month. And similar to building muscle, you don't just show up to the gym and squat 400 pounds. It's just not the way it works. So it's the execution needed for each one of those different dealerships are what we're really interested in understanding. How do you deliver the tools needed for where they are at in that journey? And how are we servicing that client? How are we working with them? And how are we getting them to grow? So for me, execution is where it's at.
Perfect. One thing I have to say before I turn it over to Ian, one thing that's great, I think, about your business is you developed this yourself for your business originally, VinQ.
Yep.
You called it maybe Danny's Got to Buy Cars.
Yeah.
But
Actually, pretty close to that. Yeah.
and but the fact that you can present this to say, hey, look, I took my operation to this level, and I think you told me at one point you were buying about 100 cars a month for the store.
Yeah, right now about 130, 140 cars a month. I mean, it's the same. It's a similar story what you had. You just said that your dad saw a need, right, and saw that reconditioning needs to happen in order to scale it, right, outside of the auction. I mean, it's the same deal with us. I have a CarMax across the street from me, and I watch them buy cars and advertise that they buy cars directly from the public for years. And the impetus for me is, unfortunately, my dad had a stroke about 10 years ago, and he was the guy who was in charge of buying. And he had a stroke in the front part of his brain that had to do with language and emotion. And overnight, my buyer disappeared, right? He's still alive. He was still okay, but he lost the ability to speak. And so he got out 3 words. And I remember sitting with him on the couch after we got home from the hospital. And he looked at me and he said, "You are man," is what he told me. My dad's, comes from Ukraine and has a different way of communicating. And what I knew he was trying to say was, get out there and figure this out. Get out there and figure this out. And I never liked going to the auction. I always felt silly standing in last guy with my hand up, paying all these additional fees, transportation, and ultimately not getting the car that I really wanted, or buying somebody else's reject. So I saw how other innovators out there were taking science to be able to understand what to buy, where to buy it, what to pay for it, what the results would be at the car dealership. So I just became wildly curious about how we could solve that problem inside. And I helped my team be wildly curious because I didn't want to carry that flag by myself. I knew the pressure that it would take to really win. And so we huddled around and we created our first buying center 10 years ago. And we hired one person who was a former teacher that I knew could stick to a curriculum, stick to a syllabus, and have a longer game plan than somebody that needed to sell or buy a car today, right? And we started strategizing, and we created pay plans for that person and other people in that team that didn't make them feel like they lived and died by the day, right? Because I knew that this was a longer game that we were building. And once we figured out a little bit of the cadence, then we knew we needed technology, right? We needed, in order to really scale this, now let's get geeky. Let's start building something so that we can help, instead of hiring another 20, 30 people, maybe we build some technology that allows us to stay small on the professional services side, but scale our abilities with some tech.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. I mean, we had a chance to speak at Used Car Week Toronto, and I guess fortunately or unfortunately, we were behind a company that had a bunch of algorithms on the screen. We had to set up in, I think, 5 minutes or something like that for the panel. It was a subprime panel live at the show, which was interesting just because I think the dealers were a little shocked that the percentage of subprime in Canada is now close to 50% and growing. And they were like, oh, we thought it was 20%. We were like, wow, these are the guys who are experts. We're just hosting them. But the thing that was interesting was the speakers before us had they were data people. So they had a big screen with all kinds of graphs of all kinds of stuff. And they were talking to dealers. And the dealers are kind of like, okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So there were lots of questions. So I guess my question for both of you is, as the car business continues to change, real-time data becomes more and more important. And as you look at, say, Black Book and others, really looking weekly, daily at changes in value, what is the best advice for dealers buying cars or selling cars or reconditioning cars in terms of what they need to be thinking about doing to stay ahead of it and make sure they're making the right decisions?
I'm gonna let you go first.
Okay,
on that, Danny.
so here's a quote that I share with my team all the time. It's not my quote, but I love it. Instinct is all of your experiences coming together in one moment. Okay? Instinct is all of your experiences coming together in one moment. And so what I mean by that is, as dealers forever, we've been very proud of being able to maybe appraise a car on the spot, right? You can ask my dad, what's this car worth? He can tell you pretty closely because he's had the experience in the lane, selling cars, buying cars, to know what the value is something. You can say, hey, what car should we be buying right now for our business? Instinct. He can tell you because he has the experience. Our job as experts is to continue gaining that experience in every way possible. That's why we're at this show. That's why we continue to invest in technology. The other side of that is the experiences will affect the way we show up, right? The decisions we make, and that is data. The data affects our decisions. So be curious about the data on the screen. Don't just believe that a system that's been around for 20 years that's showing you some information is right. Question it. Ask what is behind a value like VRank. What is behind an algorithm? Because then you can begin to make changes. So an exercise we do at our store is we give 5 cars to our sales managers and say, appraise these blindly. Don't talk to each other. And let me see the values that you come up with. And then guess what? They're normally in the old days, there were 5 different values. Why? Because they're each using their experience differently. They're looking at different numbers on the screen, whether it be books or MMR numbers or transaction numbers or book values, whatever. And they each have a different exit strategy in their mind. So by doing that exercise, we can then come back together and say, the real answer lives somewhere in between. And what's the strategy that our dealership has in order to win? And how is the way you're bidding cars pointed in the direction of that strategy? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, then on the recon side, obviously after you buy the cars, what's your advice on getting that through recon fast, but more importantly, doing it in an affordable way that's predictable? I guess. I don't know.
Right. I think a lot of the same. And it's something I've thought about as we've been sitting up here today and listening to Danny talk about the changing market is really not doing things one way because that's how it's always been done. So I think there's a lot of that in almost any industry, but really we notice it in the car industry. You talk about your dad having a stroke, had he not done that and forced you into a position where you had to go out,
I would have stayed comfortable.
You would have stayed comfortable, and he would have been buying the same way he'd always been buying.
That's right.
So it was an incredible opportunity for you to grow and stretch, and also an incredible opportunity for your dealership and for, another company to kind of be born out of that. And all of that comes through changes, whether it's in the market, in the industry, in our lives. And this industry is becoming very young. I mean, I used to feel very young around all these people, and now I'm starting to feel a little old. As
Excuse me. Excuse me. I think when I started in the business, you was but a baby, maybe not even a figment. So
possibly, I'll take that. But yeah, so it's really neat to see changing ideas and people doing things different. We're in a very technology driven world. So, bringing that back to Recon and what to do and how to make that decision, a lot of it is going to fall back on the dealer or the remarketer who is going to be responsible for selling that car. So they're going to have to use the resources that they have available to them, their instinct and all of that, to know what they can get back out of that car. Obviously as a Recon company, we'll do it all for you and would love to, but there is just kind of a sweet spot there in what you can invest into that vehicle to get the most return for it. And
as a data person, what I hear is I want that data as a dealer to be able to put into our vehicle details page so that the consumer and the salesperson can be empowered to share value.
Right.
Because that is what is giving us a leg up as dealers to win. But it takes partners like you in order to complete that value chain.
Right, and kind of close that gap there. So it does take everyone partnering together to share the data and find. I mean, we're all going to see it from a different perspective and based on what we're trying to get out of it as a company, because we're all, everyone's in business to make a profit and to be able to continue their business on and grow it. But we have to partner with each other and really share that data back and forth. It makes everyone better, really, in the end, and makes the whole experience better all the way down to the consumer.
Well, I have to tell you, there's one thing that keeps coming up lately with everybody we talk to. Maybe it's because Ian and I may correct it that way, but you seem to be reverting back a lot. To, the industry at the moment is kind of going back to the easy go, and not in general, but there's a lot of people that are doing things. We said this a second ago. I don't got to recon the car. I'll just go to the auction. Why do I have to put all this effort into talking to these yo-yos that don't show up and stuff? So the two of you are doing something that seems to be bucking the trend. What's happening now is there's that old saying, which if you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep getting what you've been getting. It's kind of broken right now because you got a car, you can sell it in many cases.
Right.
But you two are part of that new thing. I mean, the reconditioning, has always been stick it to the lock kit, get them to clean it up, get it out there real quick. You know what? So the tires are a little bald. We'll tell them they're on order. But and with Danny, of course, we'll just go to the auction. And long roundabout way of saying, you two are both second generation people, which get slighted in this industry terribly. But you're also breaking it through. And what is it what makes you different than some second gens that are?
I don't know that there's really anything that makes you different other than just being willing to. You really have to be willing to fail and to make a mistake, to try new things and find the best processes for that to work, and to find what Danny's dealership needs. What are they looking for? What are their customers looking for in the car? And something I think with Recon especially that's changing a lot is the CarMax, the Carvana, the whole directly to the consumer, delivering that car right to them. And with all the technology that we have now, not all the cars go to auction. Still a whole lot of cars go to auction, and they still will, and they still should. I think there's a place for all of it, and it can be a hybrid type market. There are cars that need to go to auction and through that process, and then the dealers can sell cars to each other or directly from the consumers and that. But when that happens, then the need for recon isn't as clear, right? So at the auction, when a remarketing company or a manufacturer or someone is selling those cars through auction, they have standards on what they're going to put in, how much they're going to spend on recon on the car and all of that, and what, depending on how old the car is or how many miles it has on it, what gets done to it. But that changes, and maybe Danny, you can help answer that some. When you're not buying those cars from auction, you're buying them from the consumer or from another dealer. How do you make that determination?
So I call it a WAR process. WAR stands for wholesale auction retail. And in a WAR mentality, you have strategy. Okay. So along a vehicle timeline, when you buy a car, at point of acquisition, what's the next thing? Reconditioning. At point of reconditioning, you decide disposition. What are you going to do with it? Point of disposition, if you're keeping it for retail, it goes where? It gets completed recon, and it goes to merchandising, and then it goes to pricing, and then it goes to advertising. And then at the end of it, what happens? It's strategy on understanding how did that process go and how are you going to start that over again. But within each one of those, we can do an entire conference on, because there are experts like you, like me, like others that live in each one of those silos. And what I am seeing is disruptors like Carvana and CarMax and Vroom and AutoNation and Lithia and Driveway. They are becoming scientific about each one of those silos. And so as owners of car dealerships, as leaders, it's our job to become those experts, or bring on those people into a car dealership. So consider your org chart. Do you have digital strategists on your team? Do you have experts on your team that are going to help you with digital retailing, help you with making sure that your VDPs are pulling all the data to compete with other car dealers? Because at the end of the day, what we're all fighting for is customer experience. Every one of us here is creating a wonderful customer experience for our end user. That's the goal. And so having those conversations in a car dealership with your team is really important, because it's easy to get stuck in any one of these silos and have debates if we don't forget the fact that what we're after is creating a great customer experience.
100%. We were having that discussion, ironically, last night, talking about dealerships that have, say, a sales team, they have a management team, they have a fixed ops team, and they have a BDC team. And they're all kind of chasing the same customer, but sometimes, they're conflicting with each other because they're all sort of chasing that sale. And really, it's about what's that process for the customer. And
that's right.
What does that look like? And are they working together as opposed to at loggerheads with each other and really causing chaos?
That's right. I have a quote that I love. Pain pushes, vision pulls. So are you being pushed by pain, or is there an individual within your dealership that's being pushed by pain? Maybe they're a recon manager and they see the problem. They feel it, right? But upstream, they're like, everything's fine. Sales manager's like, no, my life is good. What you're doing is great. But this recon manager understands that, no, there's problems happening. Pain pushes, vision pulls. And so that's why these strategy sessions within your team are so critical, because when you bring that diverse thinking to one table, all of a sudden vision exceeds pain, and now you have strategy, and you can use the tools that you have as well as the people in order to begin really competing and creating beautiful customer experiences.
Right. I was going to say something very similar to that, is having that vision and making sure that everyone on the team knows the end goal. So that's that customer experience, that there's different ways to get there. And depending on, like you said, whether they're in the sales or recon or, what department they're in, they are going to go about that a different way. So everyone has what's important to them, and you need to make sure that what's important to them is fine, but you need to make sure that what's important to the customer and that experience, that we're all working towards the same goal. Because if you're not doing the right thing, in the end, it's going to create a problem for the customer, and then you've lost it.
And for your profit and loss.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
We were talking about that too. You look at the demographics of the age demographics changing, but also the way you might communicate with, say, a Gen X or a baby boomer is vastly different than what you do with, say, a millennial or Gen X. Not to pick a generation for random, but yeah,
you have to ask. You got to ask how. Like,
Right.
do you prefer I call you or do you prefer I text you, instead of just assuming that you tell your sales team we're only doing text and video now. Like, if you did that to my dad or grandfather or grandmother, they wouldn't do business with you. They need a phone call.
But here's the funny part. When you ask them, you might get surprised. My mother-in-law's in her 80s, and she'd rather text.
Yep.
And so you don't say
The point is, continue to be curious.
And you have to ask the question. So, I mean, it's all about meeting a need and making sure that, you know, especially with customers, that you're meeting them where they are. So you have to make sure you're asking the questions and really listening to the answer and understanding, making sure that they understand the question, really. Yeah.
You know, it's all about the one end process. And again, in this discussion that we had last night was the fact that so many people are just worrying about their end. And it's not because of them, it's not because of somebody else, it's because of the system. It's because somebody says, well, okay, so the BBC department hasn't been bringing in noise, but the sales is doing way better. The sales is going, BBC is this, no, we're sales isn't doing it because BBC is bringing in customers. Recon's getting the cars clean, but the merchandisers aren't doing that. The merchandisers doing it, the marketers aren't doing that. In the end, the car doesn't sell. And everybody's going, this is me. And,
Right.
But again, it sounds like the things that you say were the point is the end result. I mean, obviously, you know, it's the end result.
You gotta eliminate the friction in the store before you can eliminate the friction outside the store. Bring fixed ops and sales together. Bring the titling office, the accounting office, and sales and fixed ops together, because we forget at moments that it takes all of us. And we think that, you know, the what's in it for me mentality or what am I responsible for mentality, that's not my job mentality, is a slipper. It's just slippery. It strictly isn't. But we are beautiful humans with a lot of empathy. So bring us together to strategize together. The best comes out in us because we ultimately want to help each other win.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. So to simplify it a little bit from what we do in a detail shop, you have a line of people cleaning the car, and it, you know, starts in detrash and it moves to interiors and all of that. They all have to work together. And one thing we really do when we're training a new crew or, you know, starting up a new location is really making sure that they understand, that each station understands how they affect the next one and ultimately the end result. So you can't have 6 people working individually. You have to have a team of 6 people all working together. And it's the same thing when you're talking about the sales department or titling or all of that. It's like we said, everybody gets stuck in their silos and what's important to them at that moment, but everyone has to understand how what they do impacts the next person down the line, that impacts the next person down the line, that ultimately impacts the end result, and how efficient and, you know.
Have you guys read a book called Tribe? It is a fantastic book, and it talks about tribal mentality across hundreds of years all the way to today, and how important. I mean, it kind of talks about, in some ways, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and there's this, you know, idea that we all have to come together. But there's another side of it that I believe that we can celebrate the diversity within each, because cultures come together for a reason. I was sitting at dinner with my kids the other night at a restaurant, and I looked at a fish tank with like just a diverse group of fish. But I always noticed that certain groups of fish would always swim together, and I'm like, there's diversity in there, but there's also culture in there, and the culture comes together. Same thing happens within a car dealership. Same thing happens within any business, and to celebrate that, I think is powerful.
So you'll always notice the new sales people following the really top sales people. Little fish follow the sharks.
It's true.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I was doing my MBA recently, they were talking about operations. They were comparing General Motors and Toyota, and they were looking at how they build cars, and this was what they did, but they were talking about the real-time learning in Toyota versus the backward thinking of General Motors at the time. I'm like, let's build them and hope it works out. But the thing that was interesting was every person on that line was really impacting what they were changing pretty much in real time, and the results were pretty stark. So it was very interesting. But always looking at ways to enhance it. And I think with dealerships, sometimes we get locked into, we got to go back to basics, or we got to do it this way, or we have always been that way. But more importantly, what's a better way to do it? Let's have a discussion about it, versus on the side.
Well, and some of that is making sure that people feel empowered to do that too, so that they are willing to speak up and say, hey, I think there's a better way to do this, or can we try this? And something we really try to communicate with our team is we want everyone to speak up, but know that we have to try it and talk about it and make sure it makes sense too, right? Because you don't want, if it's not something that works, you don't want the individual or the group of people who came up with that to feel like they can't come up with ideas anymore. We're not always going to adopt everything, and I think that's with anything, but any business, whether it's in a dealership or an auction or in a recon department, but people have to be willing to speak up. And I think a lot of times people are almost scared to do it.
But
they wanna
disagreement
know.
is so healthy.
It's
so
and
healthy.
and that's where ideas come from.
Yeah,
is
that's right, because it's how you
talk
find
it
true
out, and
north.
you might end
If we
somewhere
all
completely
agree,
different than where you
how
thought.
boring is that?
Right, right.
Well, there's a great
And-
book, it's called Radical Candor, if you've read it, but it's about when he used to work for Google, and she witnessed one of her coworkers challenge one of the founders. It's probably not a good idea to do that. And then he actually appreciated it, but more importantly, eventually worked with her. And then she developed this strategy based on real-time feedback. It's quite interesting because there's another gentleman.
What's the name of it again?
It's called Radical Candor.
Candor.
Radical Candor. I'm going to get that.
And it's really good. And Ray Dalio is another one who sort of uses the same thing, but in a digital way. But the thing that was interesting is that she then went on to teach at Apples University, because she really developed this mindset of, well, if we had real-time feedback both ways, people would probably get more done and it'd be more efficient. So it's a very interesting book.
Actually, speaking about books like that, there's a book called It's My Ship. Seeing as how we're located right across from the naval base, and it was an admiral.
I've actually read that book.
Yeah, it's not an admiral, it's just a captain. But he took the worst ship in the Navy and he made it the best ship. And there's one of the lines in there that he basically said he walked down to, I think it was the galley, but it was something nondescript, and said, tell me something you can do better. And he said this, I'm not sure the rank in basic seaman level 1, said, we're actually taking the food out of the fridge an hour before we should, and we don't touch it. Something to that effect.
Okay.
And they stopped doing that. All of a sudden, they had less food going rotten, and everybody was happy. The people, man, steering the ship were doing better because they weren't eating crappy food to that level. And a leader who thinks they're infallible is a loser. I didn't get that from the book. I just created that. Anybody wants it? It cost you 50 cents. If you could do one thing, if you could say one thing to anybody watching this or anybody you know to do better, a little more specific than listen, what would you say?
To do better, one thing. I think the one thing I would say is just don't be afraid to try it. Try anything new. So we talk about being here. Danny talked about executing and being able to execute your business better and execute your ideas better. You can't be afraid to fail. I mean, I think that's I know. I'm going to back up. The one thing I would say is be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
You can't. Anybody who says they've never made mistakes is a liar. And some of the biggest, most successful businesses out there really admit they screwed up on something.
Well, I don't think you want to be that person that didn't make mistakes. I mean, that's kind of where we were talking about disagreement. Disagreement, you have to be able to have that conversation, but you have to be able to make mistakes to know what you can do better. If you're always doing it right, if everything's always going good, it's really hard to find any new ways to do things and better ways to do things.
There's a lot of people here that I've idolized for a long time. Larry Bruce just walked by. That man sold 6 companies to Reynolds and Reynolds. Chip Perry's here walking around. That when I walk up to them and I get to talk to them, I realize they don't have it figured out. They're here because they're learning. They're here because they're still trying to better themselves. And in the meantime, they're rubbing off on other people. So I think who you spend your time with is so important. Be unapologetic about curating your tribe, about getting people around you that you may not know why you're attracted to them yet, but there's a reason. You'll figure it out, and get yourself in those situations because they're trying to figure it out too. So and they their ROI may be different. Maybe their ROI is they want to share their experience so that you can grow. Because I used to have that fear, that imposter syndrome, that fear of like, what's in it for them and why would they talk to me? The truth is, there's a great satisfaction about gaining the knowledge and then sharing the knowledge. And as we all grow up, hopefully we all get to experience that. But protect your tribe and fire those that no longer belong in it as quickly as possible. Really important.
I agree with that 100%. I mean, I had the opportunity recently to meet a person on the line. His combined companies made about $14 billion last year. Started out selling cars part-time in college to friends of his, and then built the dealerships from the ground up. But the thing that was interesting is he's 94 now, still works 6 days a week, and he's still interested. I mean, to me, to be at that age and not only be a person, but be still interested in growing in multiple businesses. He employs over 60,000 people. It's a private corporation. So it's very interesting to meet someone that's at stature, but more importantly, still interested at that age.
That's amazing. And there are so many people at this conference, this week especially, as we continue to, we said earlier, I said it was becoming a young business. There's still so many people that are here right now that have so much knowledge. And, like Danny said, the more people you can talk to and learn from, you want to soak that up. I always say, with my dad especially, I wish I could bottle up all of his knowledge and have it, thankfully I'm in a position right now and he's here today too, I still get to work with him every day. So
And they're not all right either. There's some crappy ideas out there.
Yes.
But get in there, figure that out, like be a part of that, because that's the amazing part about it.
Well, Ian, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be doing some shows next year called Generations, where we're going to have multi-generational cardio families. I come from a family of that as well, but I think it's going to be very interesting to see the perspective of the daughter, son, second, third generation versus the father and grandfather, and sort of what their view on change is, but more importantly, what they've learned from right or wrong. But more importantly, when you look at, I think, the dealership business in general, I think the business is still very healthy because we live in something. I think technology isn't something you should be afraid of. It's something you should embrace because it gives you that information you need to pivot more effectively, but more importantly, to adapt to change. And I think what's going to happen in 2023, and I'm not saying 100% is right, but I think the rate of change is going to accelerate. And I think that's something that dealers really need to pay attention to, even though they had a great 2022. I mean, any thoughts on that?
I read a quote that from Bill Gates that said, people always underestimate how much will change in 2 years. They always think that everything's going to change in the next 2 years, right? But they also underestimate how much changes in 10 years. And I think that's really interesting. So I agree with you. I think there's going to be a rapid acceleration. But the way you get rid of fear is curiosity. Get in there. And if you're not going to get in there, surround yourself around people on your team that are going to get in there with you, that have a genuine desire.
Right. I agree with that. And surrounding yourself with people who are going to push you to do better. So I said earlier that coming here, I wanted to foster those relationships that I've built through other conferences and through the industry. And there are people that are here right now that I've been around this week already who make me better. They might be competitors. They might work in a different aspect of the industry, but they push me to do better, to think about things differently, and to really put myself out there. So I think it's important to be around those people because it is changing. I mean, you said it's hard to comprehend what the amount of change that'll happen in 2 years. I think even in 6 months. I mean, we've seen so much change just this year already, and and the year before, but really even since summer, I've seen so much change just with the way the pricing of the cars, you know, from our end, what's happening in Recon, and then how the dealerships are. I've seen a tremendous uptick in the amount of cars, at least, you know, where I live in Tennessee. You passed all these dealerships that were just empty parking lots for the longest time. And I feel like almost overnight, they're full of cars. So
Well, thank you both very much for taking the time with us. Any parting comments?
I just thank you all for
Yeah.
being here. It's been great. It was great to meet Danny. And
Ditto. Yeah. I mean, it's just awesome that you guys are giving us the space to talk, and it's not just like a 30-second something. It's and I hope that people continue to get uncomfortable.
yes.
One thing we're proud of, we like to believe, we're proud of it, we like to believe it's true, is that we make it less about us and more about the people that we have on board. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. It was a great show, and follow us anywhere you would like on your favorite podcast, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and of course on our YouTube, or subscribe to our own channel.
Well, thanks. It's